Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our new webinar about improving customer experience within GDPR boundaries. A webinar where we would like to focus on two strong movements within the big data industry. Movement that seems contradicting and movements that are leading up to a paradox where several parties within the data industry are colliding head to head with each other. On one hand, you might have noticed this way before in your company, by the way, but people are awakening to the powerful possibilities that combining online and offline internal and external data holds into powerful insights. And for you to achieve that, you need innovative ways to collect and consume a lot of data. But on the other hand, we are seeing new legislations, such as the GDPR and the e-privacy regulations, to protect privacy of individuals and constrain the use of data. And this is where the challenging paradox lies within. From Advertisement, we have today Janus de Visser, our Senior Data Governance Consultant, and then me, Caroline Thor, consultant within Data Analytics and Data Governance. And then we have the pleasure to have this webinar together with our partner, Protegrity, where Marco Caroma will lead us through practices on how to protect your data. As the name states, Protegrity are specialists in data protection because today is all about personalization of customer journeys that requires tremendous amounts of data. Data that needs to be protected. So, here's today's agenda. In this webinar today, we're going to talk to you about the demand for highly personalized customer journeys and what companies are facing in terms of competition. We're going to talk to you about how to pragmatically set this up, how personal data should be available for your digital channels, and how we're going to talk about the paradox of the seemingly contrasting worlds where public opinions demands privacy protection, where legislation demands data protection, and while only the most engaging companies remain standing. Then we would like to conclude this webinar with pragmatic advice from our partner Protegrity on how to protect data and how to implement data protection solutions. Please feel free to send us in questions to us as we go along with the webinar, and we will try to answer this at the end of our sessions. So we hope at the end of this meeting you will take away what is needed for highly engaging customer experience, how the technical needs for highly engaging customer experience are at odds with the movement to protect our privacy, but also how to build a solution that protects privacy while remaining relevant to your customers. So let's begin.
Hello everyone, this is Janus de Visser from Advertisement as well, just like Caroline. Caroline, thanks for introducing me and Marco today. When I hear people talking about customer journeys and customer experience, there are always the same names that are popping up in my mind and the same names we see in nearly every presentation. It are those few examples of companies who are doing customer journeys and customer experience right. And here we have 4 logos, and I think everybody will recognize them. It's Apple, Spotify, Netflix, and Google. And these are a few of those companies that are at the frontier of customer experience. And what do these companies have in common? Well, first of all, these are all digital born and have known little else than digital interaction with their customers. They never started with a physical space. They just always worked within the digital realm and all have an impeccable, engaging customer experience and very, very rewarding customer journeys. So why do we mention them and why do we keep mentioning them? Well, it is because they set the pace. They set the bar for all other companies. And even to enforce this by 2020, Gartner states that customers will manage 85% of all their relationships with such enterprises without any human interaction. So for every company, it's going to be vital interest to invest in this digital interaction and create a same engaging customer experience and rewarding customer journeys. But not only is this very difficult, there are even more challenges on the way. So let's go back a bit. What do we mean when we say engaging customer experience? Because if you operate in the digital domain, the customers you interact with should have a smooth, effortless and consistent story across all channels they visit. It shouldn't matter whether they call you, whether they visit your app, or whether they go to your website. Everything should be smooth and especially consistent, because this consistency requires a certain infrastructure, an infrastructure that enables you to recognize a person, an individual, and interact with them based on the very last things you know about this person. Because if your message isn't right or it is too late, you have lost any relevance and you will not have this engaging experience for your customers. So what you should end up with is an infrastructure that enables you to enrich every touch point with the data it needs to provide this relevant message. So the baseline to enrich any touchpoint data and significantly increase its value is to add personal data. And this is information you generally store in your CRM systems and data warehouses. And by adding this data, you lower the risk of targeting a person with the wrong message. As we all know, the wrong message is simply lost money, as it won't result in any return of investment. And to put it even more bluntly, with a wrong message, you've only invested in training your could-be customer in ignoring marketing messages. And we as consumers have become increasingly good at this, making effective marketing even that much more challenging and expensive. And the same thing goes for something called marketing cap. We limit our marketing output because we know that too much of the same thing leads to irritation. And irritation is the last thing you want from your could-be customer, as you drive your customer further away from your brand. And we are capping marketing messages on single platforms such as Facebook and Twitter on this day. But marketing cap shouldn't be set on a single platform or even a single device. It should be set on a person, on an individual. So to be truly relevant, you need to be able to control your entire narrative with the outside world down to the level of individuals, overstepping boundaries of single platforms and devices. Now, most of the marketing managers listening to this webinar will think, yeah, this is all nicely said and done, but that's rather difficult. And they would be right. It's something most giants haven't even mastered yet. So to give you an example, Nike or Nike, I'm going to call it Nike if that's okay with you guys. I like Nike. I like their gear. They are my preferred sports brand, and Nike has with me what we call a loyal customer. Yet their marketing is doing it wrong, and I'm experiencing irritation because of a message that's not for me and it's pushed too often. Point in case, Nike is pushing tennis gear towards me in their narrative. And the problem is I don't like tennis. It's a sport I will never play. I've also never bought any tennis gear from Nike, and they know that, as I have a Nike customer account. As a result, this tennis story is currently pushing me away from their brand that I happen to buy quite often for very specific other products. So Nike is losing client loyalty because of an irrelevant story that doesn't seem to end. So in general, digital marketing has to grow from the device and platform-oriented marketing efforts to a far more personal narrative. We want to go from devices to persons. So how do we go to that next step in having a relevant conversation with a person instead of a device? Well, currently in your average digital marketing landscape, identification is done via the device that visits your digital domain, be it an app or a web. In this case, you see me and I have my website. And with this website, I am visiting some company's domain. Upon landing, several marketing tools will load via tags and place cookies on my device. And these cookies will contain a unique identifier. And with this identifier, these marketing tools can start building a profile. A profile that's based on the actions I take on their digital domain. But in the end, what a single person does with several devices, see here I have currently several devices, results in several profiles. And basically all these profiles are anonymous because they haven't been stitched together. They don't know I am all these three profiles. They know it's an iPhone, an iPad and an iMac, and this is potentially the same customer. So in your marketing narrative, your systems are talking to several different profiles. And when we're talking about marketing cap, that is for instance set on 4 messages, these systems can send out 12 messages, 4 per device, but it's maybe 12 times to a single person. To put it bluntly, I'm getting sick of this tennis narrative at this moment. And here you have what happens when you focus on single marketing tool identifiers alone. And to overcome this, we need to start building a common identifier. And to this day, this is done by the means of individuals who will have to identify themselves to you. And we normally do this by a login to a user account. So then it would be more of a picture like this. And this, the moment someone logs in, means we can create an identifier that can be used to create a single profile based on actions from several different devices. And this trick alone improves your ability to create meaningful interaction with your customers already tenfold. However, the true relevant marketing narrative lies in enriching this still seemingly anonymous profile with customer information. Information we generally store in our CRM systems and data warehouses. And with the addition of your CRM system information, you enrich your marketing operation to enable to build a relevant customer experience. So I am me again. I started as me, I visited their digital domain, and I'm me again because I want these companies to talk to me. And this particular trick is the domain where a new hype in the world of marketing, online marketing, comes into play. Sorry, somebody typed something on the keyboard, sorry for that. And I'm talking about data management platforms. And please do not focus too much on the name data management platform, because these platforms do not manage data, but they rather manage profiles used to activate other marketing tools. They allow you to control the narrative based on enriched profiles. But these DMPs, these data management platforms, require something quite specific. And what most people do not know is that DMPs do not freely accept every form of data. Nearly all of these tools that are currently available in the market require you to protect your client's privacy by only sharing protected data with the DMP. Data that is not directly identifiable to this single individual. So to go back to the Nike case, this DMP does not want to know my name, doesn't want to know my bank account, doesn't want to know my billing address or anything like that. They do, however, need my product history to decide that the tennis narrative might not be such a good idea, as I haven't bought anything tennis related since I've been a Nike customer. There's always that they could decide, of course, that I should start playing tennis to provide them with a great upsell opportunity. But in any case, the DMP requires protected data to make these decisions and marketing use cases. And this requirement, if you look at it, is not that strange at all, because we do live in a world where we have more data than we can manage. And we are slowly starting to understand the impact this will have on our privacy. So what we are doing, and please allow me to explain in the simplest way I've found to date why privacy protection should be in place and why the big data world is currently heading towards a paradox. It's as simple as this. We often see in organizations several data sources, and in this case, 2 data sets. And these data sets are set up in the correct way. For instance, we have data set A, and everything has been defined in the right way. We have consistent data we have consent from the data subject. The right security measures are in place. Ownership has been defined, and documentation is up to standard. And the same goes for this other data set. We have consent, and security, ownership, and documentation are all set up correctly within the boundaries of the governance code from the company itself. Everything is fine and neat the way we like it. But everything is fine right up until both owners sitting on top of these data sets find each other, and they talk to each other about the possibilities of what they have in their data sets. And they decide they should combine the 2. So owner of dataset A and owner of dataset B decide they can make our lives better and easier by combining these data sets. And it is exactly by combining these data sets that they create dataset C, and where all control is lost. We aren't sure on data subject consent. Quite often there are no security measures in place. For all we know, this could be done via Excel files or CSVs emailed to each other to local systems. And ownership hasn't been decided upon anyway, and documentation is probably something for in the future when there might be any time left to catch up. So this is where things start to go wrong. And this also leads to a situation advertisement faces on a daily basis. And that is that for personalization of customer interaction, the combining of data sets is crucial. This is where data innovation happens, and this is where innovation is pushed and new products and services are created. This is the holy grail. Combining data is what's all about. However, this is also where we experience the highest privacy risks. And this leads us to the paradox, because the future of digital marketing and data innovation requires more data and the occasional risk. But public opinion and governments are catching up and putting up boundaries for working with personal data. So we have 2 very distinct flows within the big data industry at this moment. On the one side, we see rapid growth of technical capabilities, and on the other hand, we have a demand for privacy protection and good conduct. Just to name a few, we have a rapid rise in data agility. We are more flexible than ever, and on the other hand, we are also more aware than ever that our privacy is at stake. We see more and more companies breaking the silos of their databases. And on the other side, we also hear on a daily basis in the news about data breaches with even the most sensitive data. Just this week, it came to light that the personal data from nearly all American voters was just out in the open. And we see technological advancements with the rise of data management platforms. And on the other hand, the European Union is coming up with one of the strictest personal data protection regulations to date. The same goes for the purely marketing side, demand-side platforms, or even meta demand-side platforms. And on the other hand, there's again a regulation, the revision of the e-privacy directive, the proposal of a privacy regulation. And please do not mistake it, this new regulation will have the same fines as the data protection regulations. So they're quite at odds. And we see a rise in active personalization on websites and apps, and we're getting better and better at it, while at the same time we also see public knowledge of the rise of public knowledge of the average consumer, even those who are not part of this industry, on the rise, and they start to understand what is going on with our personal data. And we see the development of the Internet of Things with more and more regular stuff surrounding us, physical stuff surrounding us, that's connecting with the internet and of course processing our data. And on the other hand, there is this mainstream attention going on towards privacy concerns. And we are experiencing massive ad networks and unbelievably sophisticated trackers, while at the same time single individuals are installing more and more plugins, browser plugins, to block all these ads anyway. And when we go even a step further, we see with the rise of domotica that more and more of our personal life indoors, our homes are becoming automated. And it's helping our lives, and it's also helping our elderly. While at the same time we see the rise of authorities in maturity and data protection, and they are looking with a keen eye towards such privacy intrusive situations where basically everything in our lives can determine who we really are. So to end the advertisement side of this story in this webinar, I would like to conclude with a very nice citation from a telephone company e-commerce director who we spoke last year and was already facing some sort of this paradox. And what he saw in accumulating qualitative and quantitative data is that his customers expected a completely private orientation phase. His customers wanted to go about his website without being recognized or targeted, and they just wanted to look at his offerings. But the moment they came up to the point when they were ready to pay and be converted to a customer, they expected a highly personalized offering. So let's not forget that this paradox is not only in the outside world, it's also within ourselves. We expect privacy, and we also expect highly engaging customer experience. We give away our data for free to Facebook and Google because they provide us with great experience. So we give away our data, while at the other side we're also all agreeing with new legislation like the GDPR. It is, however, very much possible to do both, to protect data and create engaging experience, as long as you build in the right technical measures. And in order to help you guys today, I would like to invite our guest speaker from Protegrity, Marco Carmora, one of the partners of Advertisement and highly specialized in automating privacy and data protection, to explain something on how to protect this privacy and what options there are. What we basically want to do is we want to tell you what options you have in protecting your privacy if you want to send your client information towards your DMP to start that relevant conversation with your customer. Marco, the digital floor is yours.
Thank you, Janos. Hello, everyone. My name is Marco Carmona. I'm a solution architect with Protegrity. So security is a layered approach, from firewalls on the networks to local operating system controls. In our case, our philosophy is simple. So the only way to protect sensitive data is to protect the data itself. But of course, layers are necessary. The problem is that when these layers are breached, data is still accessible, and that's the problem. Our security is at the data layer because we render data unusable. So for example, if somebody steals data, it's useless to them. So think about like a thief that tries to rob a bank. So first of all, he would have to go through the security people outside the bank, and then through the employees of the bank itself, trying to find all the keys to the doors, get to the basement. So all these are the layers. And then finally they get to the safe, and they, after some time, they finally breach that safe as well. And instead of money, they find confetti. That's exactly the same. So if you protect your data, you make it useless for anyone that tries to steal it. So typically we talk about de-identification of data. And there are a lot of terms in the data security world, so I'm going to try to explain a few of them that we typically use. When you de-identify your data, you can either anonymize or pseudonymize your data. If you anonymize, then de-identified data cannot be re-identified. So for example, a one-way algorithm such hashing or just randomly replace data with fake data. That's anonymization. With pseudonymization, de-identified data can be re-identified only to authorized users or processes. So we're talking about reversible algorithms. For example, tokenization is a way that we use to pseudonymize data. If you tokenize your data, you can then de-tokenize it if you are an authorized user or a process. Here's an example of fields that are in the same, for example, database record. And you have identifying fields and non-identifying fields. Identifying fields are all the ones that identify a specific user or person. For example, a first name, a last name, the address, the driver license number, the national ID number, social security, date of birth, so anything that is tied to an individual. And non-identifying fields are, for example, healthcare data, healthcare condition, spending data, financial data, the salary, so an amount, for example. And so for salary itself, if you know a value like 20,000 euros, that's not sensitive itself. It's sensitive when you know that it's associated to a specific person, to John Smith. So what you need to protect is not 20,000. You need to de-identify the record, the information. So you need to somehow decouple identifying fields from non-identifying fields. So if you look at this slide, then the de-identifying process basically removes the link between identifying fields and non-identifying fields. In other words, these identifying fields are decoupled from the sensitive information. And here is an example of how we protect the data. On the left side, you see a name, an address, so John Smith that lives at 100 Main Street in Pleasantville, California, the date of birth, so everything in the clear. And that's typically how companies store data, in the clear. Perhaps they encrypt their drives, but still most of the users can access the data in the clear, so they stop at that security level. If you protect the data itself, and in this example, if you tokenize the data, you're basically replacing real data with fake data. And as you see, the name is still like with an alphabetical token. The address is an alphanumeric token, so we're using the same data types and the same length, so that you don't have to break your applications. So with encryption, however, which is still a good way to protect your data, you'd have to change your applications or databases to store binary data, which is the result of an encryption process. So with tokenization, the date of birth is still a valid date. So you cannot get the year, the month 45 and the day 76. No, you always get a real date, a valid date that you can store in your date field in your application or database. And why is 1966 red? Because we're showing one of the features of tokenization. In this case, we are exposing the year in the clear, and that's a choice. You can tokenize the full date, so including the year, and get a year in the future or in the past. That's randomly generated. But in this case, we are exposing the year in the clear because sometimes it is possible to use protected data. And that's one of the biggest advantages of tokenization compared to encryption. So you can use tokenized data. For example, if you need to run some kind of report or a query on a database to calculate the average age of your customers, and you can do this with tokenized value if you are exposing the year. So there's no need to know exactly that this customer was born on a day, on a month. You just care about the year, and so you can do all the math and all the analysis on the year of birth. And then social security number, credit card numbers, especially used for PCI projects, but for typically they need to be protected. And same for email address. As you can see, the email address looks like a real one. but of course all the characters are scrambled, and telephone numbers. So every different data type and data element has their own set of characters in a specific format. And then what we do, we build a security policy on top of this. So once data has been protected at rest, so forget about the left part where the data is in the clear, you only keep the protected version of the data. Then we build a security policy where you have role number 1, and you probably have your database users, your application users in role number 1 who can see most of the data in the clear. Joe Smith so is then re-identified, same as the address, the date of birth, pretty much all the data elements are in the clear for this role number 1, except for credit card number. And here we are applying dynamic masking, which is different from static masking. Static masking is when you replace data at rest with a mask, so data is not re-identifiable. In this case, we're only showing the last 4 digits of a credit card number to the user in role number 1, but we're still keeping the data secured at rest. We're keeping the data tokenized, and we're only showing the last 4 digits to the user. And then you could have multiple roles. In the example here, we have role number 2, where users have a more limited access to the data. The name now is in the clear, but not the address. So you see a no access error message or a null value if you're querying a database. The date of birth might be shown as a token, so as a fake value, which you can still use for the year, because the year, as you remember, is in the clear. The social security number is displayed as the last 4 digits. Credit card is shown as a token. So you can really combine all these rules together, so by data elements and by roles. And this is how we create a security policy. And this is how it works. We have a centralized server called the Enterprise Security Administrator, is where the security officer creates the security policy. So basically it was what I just showed, data elements, roles, and all the permissions together. And now once the policy is ready to be, I think, go back to the previous one. So once the security policy is in place, it can be distributed to all the platforms that have a Protegrity agent installed. That means that data doesn't need to leave the environment where it's stored. It can actually be protected within that environment. And so in the slide here, we can see big data protectors for Hadoop systems, big data systems, for MPP platforms such as EDW, Enterprise Data Warehouses, Teradata, Oracle Exadata, IBM Netezza, Greenplum, Pivotal, etc. So many MPP platforms, as well as databases such as Microsoft SQL, DB2, so any database flavor or application. So we have an agent that runs on each of these platforms and then receives the security policy. Once the policy is in place, it can be enforced in the platform itself. In the database world, we use user-defined functions, so UDFs, to enable users or processes to protect and unprotect the data. In the big data world, there are so many different technologies that evolve pretty much every day, so now we can support Spark, Impala, Hive, Pig, and all the major components within Hadoop. For standard applications, we have an API, so a C or a Java API. We can also protect flat files on a Linux or a Windows system, and this is more at the coarse grain level, so we can encrypt the entire file or directory if that's the use case. We can protect data in IBM mainframe as well, DB2 or COBOL applications. And then on the right side, we see also Protegrity's gateways. So the gateway is a very interesting concept that allows you to protect data in transit. And so let's take a look at the gateway, how it works. We typically have an environment where there is a client, there is a server, and a data store. Data usually comes from the client, goes to the server, and the server then talks to the data store. If you're writing data, data gets written into the data store, and if you're reading the data store sends data to the server, and then it goes back to the client. So the gateway approach is kind of a proxy approach between the client and the server. So what does the client do? The client sends a message to the server, but this message gets intercepted by what we call the data security gateway. the data security gateway not only has the security policy in place, so all the roles, all the data elements, and so it knows exactly how to protect the data, but it also knows where to protect the data in a specific payload. You're sending data from the client to the server, and that can be an XML payload or a JSON that's very much used recently. So a JSON payload, it can be a Microsoft document, it can be an Excel file, a presentation, a PowerPoint. It can be a structured file such as a CSV, a PDF, or a zip file. And the gateway has all the rules defined internally to identify sensitive data and protect it. Of course, if data is very well structured, then the rules are pretty simple. Suppose a CSV file that has different columns, so you can define a rule that says column number 3, 5, and 7 are sensitive, and so go ahead and protect them. That's pretty easy to define. But then there are also files that contain unstructured data, so then the rules need to have regular expressions that identify sensitive content. For example, find all the 16 or 15 numeric values which are probably a credit card number if they have these specific properties, or anything that looks like a British postcode. It has a specific structure so you can identify it, and then data goes from the gateway to the server in a protected state, but not the entire file. So we're not encrypting the file. We are only protecting and tokenizing individual strings or individual values within that payload. So it's a fine-grained approach. The server then receives the data and then can talk to the data store. The data store then stores protected data, and if the client then needs the data back in the clear, well, the same process goes all the way around and back to the server through the data security gateway, and then the client gets the data in the clear. So sometimes I get the question, so is this fully replacing your agent-based solution? And the answer is no, because it really depends on the use case. Suppose that there are users that access the data store directly through, for example, any SQL utility on an Oracle database or a Teradata database with a SQL Assistant, SQL Studio, or Toad for Oracle. Then in that case, you still need the agent on the node, on the system, that unprotects the data so that data can be consumed in the clear by authorized users. However, if you are always querying the data through the client, then the data security gateway might be the only piece that you need to protect your data. So that's it from my side. Maybe Janusz, you want to add a few more words?
Well, first of all, Marco, thank you so much for this elaborate story on data protection. I want to go back one slide, because in terms of talking to a DMP, these scans of protocol payloads give you the ability to protect data that's stored in your CRM systems before it ends up in your DMP. So what is available with technology like this is that your inside data warehousing and CRM systems share data in a protected fashion with the outside marketing solutions that demand protected data. So everything is possible to be compliant with the GDPR and protect privacy while still building on that very crucial, relevant customer experience we just talked about. So Marco, thank you so much. And Caroline, have there been any questions?
I'm looking now, and we have not received any questions for this webinar. But first of all, I wanted to thank you, Marco and Janusz, for this valuable information of this webinar. And I also want to thank all your listeners for this webinar as well. And if you have any further questions or concerns, you can email us on info@advertisement or info@protegrity.com. And if you want to have more information on our products and our services, you can go in to search more about in our website for further inquiries. And please also follow us on social media on LinkedIn or on Twitter, where you can also find us under our company names. Yes, it's been a pleasure to talk to you all today, and we wish you all the best in the quest in enhancing your customer journeys while obtaining a high data protection. So I think it's goodbye for now. Thank you very much.